Welcome to our detailed exploration of the American War of Independence. This comprehensive guide will delve into the causes, major events, key figures, and outcomes of this pivotal period in history. Stay tuned to enhance your understanding and prepare effectively for your UPSC exams. The American War of Independence, also known as the Revolutionary War, was a monumental conflict. It began in 1775 and lasted until 1783, fundamentally altering the course of history. The war was driven by the desire for independence from British rule and the quest for self-governance. Key events like the Boston Tea Party and the signing of the Declaration of Independence were pivotal. The eventual victory of the American colonies led to the establishment of the United States of America. Join us as we journey through this fascinating era, uncovering the stories and strategies that shaped a nation. The seeds of the American War of Independence were sown in the 17th century with the establishment of the 13 colonies. These colonies, each with its own unique characteristics and governance, were initially founded for various reasons, including economic opportunities and religious freedom. Over time, they developed their own identities and ways of life, distinct from their British homeland. The British policy of mercantilism, which aimed to control colonial trade, created tension. The imposition of taxes like the Stamp Act and the Townshend Acts further exacerbated these tensions. The Stamp Act of 1765 required colonists to purchase a stamp for every piece of paper they used, which was seen as a direct attempt to raise revenue without the consent of the colonial assemblies. The lack of colonial representation in Parliament was a significant grievance. Colonists believed that they should not be taxed by a government in which they had no elected representatives. This principle of no taxation without representation was deeply rooted in the English constitutional tradition and was seen as a fundamental right. The famous slogan, "No taxation without representation," became the rallying cry for colonists. It encapsulated their demand for a voice in the legislative process and their resistance to what they perceived as unjust and arbitrary rule. Public protests, pamphlets, and speeches spread the message, uniting the colonies in their quest for greater autonomy and eventually independence. The Boston Massacre of 1770, where British soldiers killed 5 colonists, was a pivotal moment in American history. This tragic event occurred on March 5, 1770, when tensions between the colonists and British soldiers reached a boiling point. The soldiers, feeling threatened by an angry mob, fired into the crowd, resulting in the deaths of 5 men. This incident was widely publicized and used as a powerful propaganda tool by the colonists, fueling anti-British sentiment and uniting the colonies against a common enemy. The Boston Tea Party of 1773, where the Sons of Liberty dumped tea into Boston Harbor, was another significant event that escalated tensions. On the night of December 16, 1773, a group of colonists disguised as Mohawk Indians boarded 3 British ships and dumped 342 chests of tea into the harbor. This act of defiance was in protest of the Tea Act, which granted the British East India Company a monopoly on tea sales in the colonies. The Boston Tea Party demonstrated the colonists' willingness to take drastic measures to oppose British policies and assert their rights. In response to the Boston Tea Party, Britain implemented the Intolerable Acts, a series of punitive measures designed to reassert control over the colonies. These acts included the closing of Boston Harbor, the dissolution of local governments, and the quartering of British troops in colonial homes. The Intolerable Acts were seen as a direct attack on the colonists' liberties and further inflamed tensions between Britain and the colonies. The implementation of the Intolerable Acts led to the First Continental Congress in 1774. Delegates from 12 of the 13 colonies gathered in Philadelphia to discuss a unified response to British aggression. The Congress issued a Declaration of Rights, organized a boycott of British goods, and established a network of committees to enforce the boycott. This marked the first time the colonies had come together to coordinate their resistance to British rule. These events set the stage for armed conflict. As tensions continued to rise, colonial militias began to prepare for war, stockpiling weapons and training for battle. The early battles of the American Revolution, such as the skirmishes at Lexington and Concord, were a direct result of the escalating conflict between the colonies and Britain. The stage was set for a full-scale war that would ultimately lead to American independence. The war officially began on April 19, 1775, with the battles of Lexington and Concord. The shot heard round the world marked the start of the armed conflict between British forces and colonial militia. The Second Continental Congress convened, appointing George Washington as the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. The Continental Army began to organize and train, preparing for the long struggle ahead. The 13 colonies united in their cause, each contributing to the war effort. Early skirmishes and battles set the stage for a protracted and grueling conflict. The Declaration of Independence, signed in 1776, solidified the colonies' resolve to fight for their freedom. Key figures emerged, leading the charge for independence and shaping the future of the new nation. The war saw several significant battles that shaped the course of history and determined the fate of a nation striving for independence. Each battle was a testament to the bravery, strategy, and resilience of the American forces. The Battle of Bunker Hill, fought on June 17, 1775, despite being a technical British victory, demonstrated the resolve and tenacity of the American forces. The British suffered heavy casualties, which proved that the colonial militia could stand up to the might of the British Army. The Saratoga Campaign in 1777 was a turning point in the Revolutionary War. The American victory at Saratoga was significant not only because it was a major defeat for the British, but also because it convinced France to join the war as an ally to the American cause. The harsh winter at Valley Forge in 1777 to 1778 tested the resilience and endurance of Washington's troops. Despite facing severe shortages, the soldiers endured the brutal conditions. This period of suffering and perseverance became a symbol of the American spirit. In 1776, the Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence, drafted primarily by Thomas Jefferson. This document proclaimed the colony's right to self-governance and listed grievances against King George III. The war continued with fluctuating fortunes, but the American spirit remained unbroken. Under the leadership of figures like George Washington, and with crucial support from French allies, the colonies eventually secured their independence with the Treaty of Paris in 1783. The birth of a new nation was celebrated, marking the beginning of the United States of America. The decisive Battle of Yorktown in 1781 saw General Cornwallis's British forces surrender to a combined American and French army. This victory effectively ended major combat operations. The Treaty of Paris, signed in 1783, formally recognized American independence, granting significant territorial gains to the new nation. The end of the war was met with widespread celebrations across the newly formed United States. The leaders of the new nation began the challenging task of building a government. They drafted foundational documents that would guide the country for centuries to come. The legacy of the American War of Independence continues to be remembered and honored today. The American War of Independence had profound effects. It inspired revolutionary movements worldwide, sparking a wave of change that would ripple through history. The war led to the drafting of the United States Constitution, establishing a new government framework that emphasized democracy and individual rights. The war also highlighted issues of slavery, bringing them to the forefront of national consciousness and igniting early abolitionist movements. Additionally, it underscored the complex and often contentious relationships between colonists and indigenous peoples, setting the stage for future struggles over land and sovereignty. The aftermath of the war saw significant cultural shifts, as diverse communities began to shape the new nation. Economically, the war's end marked the beginning of a new era of trade and industry development, laying the groundwork for the United States' future economic power. Politically, the period was marked by intense debates and the formation of political parties, reflecting the dynamic and evolving nature of the new republic. Pause 3S. As we dive deeper into the American War of Independence, it's essential to analyze the multifaceted aspects that contributed to its outcome and legacy. One critical factor was the role of international alliances. The support from France, Spain, and the Netherlands was pivotal in tipping the scales in favor of the American colonies. French military aid in particular provided crucial resources and strategic advantages, culminating in the decisive victory at the Battle of Yorktown. Another key aspect was the innovative military strategies employed by the Continental Army. Under the leadership of General George Washington, the Army utilized guerrilla tactics and strategic retreats to outmaneuver the better-equipped British forces. The harsh winters at Valley Forge tested the resilience of the Continental soldiers, but also served as a crucible for their training and unity. The war also brought to light the ideological underpinnings of the American struggle for independence. Enlightenment ideas of liberty, equality, and self-governance were not just abstract concepts but driving forces that motivated the colonists to fight against tyranny. These principles were enshrined in foundational documents like the Declaration of Independence and later, the Constitution, which continue to influence democratic movements worldwide. Economic factors played a significant role as well. The British blockade of American ports led to shortages and economic hardship, but it also fostered a spirit of self-reliance and innovation among the colonists. The post-war period saw the emergence of a market economy that laid the foundation for the United States' future industrial growth. Lastly, the war's social impact cannot be understated. It was a period of profound change for women, African Americans, and indigenous peoples. Women took on new roles in the absence of men, managing farms and businesses, which began to challenge traditional gender roles. The war also set the stage for future debates on slavery and civil rights, as the principles of freedom and equality clashed with the realities of a society still deeply divided by race. Pause 3S. Understanding these detailed insights and analyses helps us appreciate the complexity and significance of the American War of Independence, not just as a historical event, but as a transformative period that shaped the modern world. Pause 3S. While we've covered the strategic and ideological aspects of the American War of Independence, it's equally important to remember the personal stories of those who lived through it. These narratives bring a human touch to the historical events we often discuss in the abstract. Pause 2S. Take, for instance, the story of Abigail Adams. While her husband John Adams was away helping to shape the new nation, Abigail managed their farm and provided for their family. Her letters to John reveal not just the hardships she faced, but also her unwavering support for the cause of independence and her advocacy for women's rights. Pause 2S. Then there's the tale of Peter Salem, an African American who fought valiantly at the Battle of Bunker Hill. Though born into slavery, Salem earned his freedom through military service. His bravery in battle and his significant contributions to the war effort exemplify the complex interplay of liberty and slavery during this period. Pause 2S. We also have the story of Sybil Ludington, a young woman who, at just 16 years old, rode through the night to warn American forces of an impending British attack. Her ride, often compared to that of Paul Revere, highlights the crucial roles played by women and young people in the struggle for independence. Pause 2S. Lastly, let's not forget the indigenous peoples who found themselves caught in the conflict. Figures like Joseph Brant, a Mohawk leader, navigated the treacherous waters of alliance and survival, balancing their people's interests with the demands of both British and American forces. Pause 3S. These personal stories remind us that the American War of Independence was not just a series of battles and treaties, but a deeply human experience that affected countless lives. By understanding these individual experiences, we gain a richer, more nuanced perspective on this transformative period in history. The American War of Independence was a landmark event that reshaped global politics. Understanding its causes, key events, and consequences is crucial for grasping modern history. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more educational content.